Welcome to my session on artificial intelligence. Today, I'm going to speak on the ecology of words, generative AI as a social collaboration tool. AI essentially is a type of social robotics. It interacts with people to understand social situations. It also simulates a lot of social situations. Speaking of social robotics, let us start with something lighthearted. This is a meme I came across, which parodies the humanity test that we typically encounter when using computer systems. My personal favorite is not, I'm not a robot, but rather, I'm not a robot, but I know you are. So this feels a bit hypocritical. The next one is also pretty good. I reject the binary assumptions underlying this statement. Or, I'm not a robot, but I'm willing to convert. You noticed my title, Ecology of Words, which is a relational metaphor, which is to say, we live with the permanent ambient noise that is artificial intelligence. But on some level, that ambient noise, the ambient condition is not so different from words from other eras, from other people, and so on, as we write. It's just perhaps the ambient conditions set by AI, it is more overwhelming. Speaking of social collaboration, the first thing we need to note is that AI models, good models, are actually themselves deeply collaborative. They are the result of social collaboration, even if a lot of the laborers have been anonymized. They have not been recognized. Those who beta tested and red flagged various issues, those who helped to curate and clean up data sets to produce high quality data sets to train large language models. So when we think of collaboration, we are thinking of the model of distributed intelligence in our society. This is essentially, with the rise of modernity, the society decided to adopt distributed intelligence as a way of life. We outsource expertise to various people, to dentists, physicians, pilots, and so on, so that one single person does not have to know how to do all of these things. But collectively, the humanity will be able to achieve and accomplish a lot of other things. But distributed intelligence also refers to the idea that intelligence is not a thing, but rather it is a network, right? It is the collective outcome of all of the different types of cognition and intelligence from different agents. And this is when I have to mention a new case that has just emerged. It's actually an exciting project at MIT. And the project is called co-LLM. It's an algorithm that supervises a general purpose AI model and enables it to collaborate with an expert model. So this general purpose LLM is talking to expert LLM thanks to the co-LLM algorithm, which will oversee the output and to decide at which juncture the expert LLM needs to be called upon. So it's an efficient model, but also ensures more accuracy in terms of the output. And that's just one example of how AI is actually deeply collaborative itself. I spoke of AI as a type of social robotics. This means that it is very good at simulation. It is not efficient in terms of assembling or retrieving facts, tasks that require precision. But tasks that actually celebrate and allows for fuzziness would be well suited. So this is a fuzzy task, fuzzy tool for fuzzy task. Generative AI, as long as we keep trained human in the loop, can simulate social situations effectively for various training purposes. It outputs represents the means of common beliefs and biases within a society, and so it is also a social surveillance instrument. In higher education context, I have used generative AI to do a number of things. None of them require cognitive functions. None of them involves creation of new knowledge. So one example of how I use it as a form of social robotics is I use AI to anonymize student papers by creating a fictional paper with all the patterns of writing that we seek to address. And it's able to do this thanks to the 20 or 30 student papers that I feed it. So it's a kind of recognizing the patterns and then reproducing the patterns. That's one thing that AI is reliable at and is pretty good at. So this would enhance peer review workshops in class by overcoming obstacles in learner psychology. Typically, people see writing, especially in education, as something very personal, right? And so to be criticized and say, you need to improve on this part of your writing, a lot of people would balk at the idea. They felt like it's personal attack because writing is an extension of yourself. Now, this fictional paper is not by any real person in the room, even though it reflects all the issues that we want to work on. It's an excellent example of how AI can work well as social robotics to enhance learning. Here's an example of AI as social robotics. As I mentioned, AI is suitable for simulative tasks to simulate social situations. MIT has launched a project called AI Comes Out of the Closet. This specific generative AI creates a virtual character to chat with LGBTQ advocates for the purpose of training, but also fostering empathy when they interact with the community later. And this is an example of excellent use of the fictive and creative aspect of generative AI. While it may not have domain knowledge or be able to engage in precision-driven tasks, this kind of conversational simulation is a fuzzy task, and AI as a fuzzy tool is perfect for this kind of task. Here is another example of AI as social robotics. Again, it's used to simulate conversations and situations. And in this particular project called Future You, the AI will simulate an older version of the user. And Future You, according to their research, could reduce anxiety and guiding young people to make better choices. The research concept here is the psychological notion of future self-continuity. It's a measure of how connected a person feels with their future self. Until now, we could not easily have this kind of simulation visually as well as textually. So this is a textual chatbot, which is supposed to be a future version of the user that is created out of an elaborate questionnaire of the user would fill out. So that's another example of creative uses of AI as social robotics. Scholars have also used AI for data justice by anonymizing sensitive data and also using AI to recognize handwriting patterns across hundreds of personal letters. And this way they can open up archives while respecting privacy of historical figures. So one such project is called The Personal Writes the Political, rendering Black lives legible through the application of a machine learning model to anti-apartheid solidarity letters. And this is funded by the American Council for Learned Society. And one of the project leaders, Stephen Davis, says that they're pleased to come up with this innovative way to open up the archive while ensuring privacy concerns are respected. Because machine learning models the methods are transferable, They're hoping that the workflow they're going to model will eventually be adopted by other scholars. At this point, I want to shift to the idea of civic science. I would like to promote the culture of civic science. Basically, the idea of civic science involves two entities. The scientists should act like citizens, and then citizens who are not scientists should engage in the social implications of technologies so that they become partners, so that it's not a top-down model. It's not a model of kind of, I just design whatever because I can, and I don't consult the community. So this is a community-oriented approach to collaboration for the social good. And if we foster the culture of civic science, we can counter the monopoly of profit-driven large corporations who would apply corporate logic as defined by tech pros. Historically, technologies have often been developed by able-bodied engineers without community input. One example is sign language machine translation, a very exciting new field, but a field that faces a lot of obstacles because it's led by hearing scientists without input from deaf researchers. And sign language is actually very rich in performative content. It has informational channel, it has emotional channel. And so in this instance, the machine learning model needs to be trained to recognize all of that and not just the words that are being signed, right? But kind of what's the tone, what's the situation, all of that currently is missed in sign language machine translation. If we develop a culture of civic science, we can solve three problems. First, we can reduce the biases of technological solutionism. This is a kind of misconception that there is an algorithm for everything. And the way our society is talking about AI and technologies right now, it's both positive and negative. On the one hand, philosophical problems are coming into public discourses. But these problems are misconceived to be purely engineering ones. A lot of aspects of these problems are actually social and even political, right? How much should we regulate AI, for instance? As much as I appreciate the entrance of the so-called eternal questions into technologies, I've also observed that oftentimes these conversations about moral agency or free will remain quite shallow. And I think that's because we lack a culture of civic science. There's the kind of sharp divide between humanistic thinkers, for example, and coders. They need to come together and have a more substantive conversation. And that could solve our third problem, AI being weird. Predominantly white, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic. That describes the type of data sets that the AI has been trained on, but also the design, the kind of the backgrounds of the typical designers of AI. I built my own proprietary custom-trained artificial intelligence chatbot. Primarily, I did this in response to a number of trends, which I'll show you on my next slide. There are a lot of surveys showing widespread use of AI among college students, though they don't use it intelligently. There's a caveat, of course, the research results are all over the place, even though when it comes to use of AI for any purpose, the percentage is very high. So that at least they agree on. Some of these research surveys are commercially driven, like the one by Quizlet, but they all point toward a need that is this inclusive education. In terms of the surveys, let's take a look at Digital Education Council's September 2024 survey, where they surveyed nearly 4,000 respondents, and 80% of these college students said they have used AI in some capacity. 24% of them use AI daily. The disappointing news is that ChatGPT remains the most used AI tool among students. Of course, thanks to the late 2022 release of ChatGPT, this particular tool remains the most well-known, right? Even though it's not suited for every kind of task, but the general purpose, GPT has gained a lot of traction. What is interesting to note is that nearly 70% of students, when it comes to the type of users they put AI to, they actually treat GPT as a kind of search engine to search for information. We know that there's always the risk of fabricated information and factual errors. So in my view, ChatGPT or AI tools are actually not suitable to be used as a search engine. There are other more efficient tools, such as Google without the AI overview, such as scholarly databases, library catalogs, and so on, to lead you to peer-reviewed and vetted sources. And so there's a downside of over-relying on GPT as a source of information. I am very motivated by this survey result that shows that what students are really looking for is 24/7 assistance with chatbot answering questions, and at a low cost, low to no cost. So I decided to build my own trustworthy AI to fulfill this need. 63% of students mentioned that they appreciate having access to some kind of assistance around the clock. My open access AI teaching assistant, specifically trained for humanities higher education, is located at criticaltheory.info. So if you go to the site and look at the lower right corner, you will see a dialog bubble. You click it, you can activate the assistant here and chat it like you would with any AI, though there are a number of special features we'll go into. As soon as you enter a chat, you'll see that there's a box that floats. It says contact Professor Joubin. So this is my fail-safe mechanism in case, despite my strict boundary setting coding in the background, the AI still gives questionable information, or despite the answers, you still have questions, and simply click that link. You can contact me. So this is to insert my presence here, to keep trained human in the loop, but also to tell students I am always here. I did not outsource education just to an AI, which is a copy of me. It's trained on transcripts of my lectures, all the assigned readings. It's trained on my writing, and so is capable of answering questions very precisely because I set the boundary to make it draw answers only from the data set. So if you were to ask it questions about astrophysics, for example, that's beyond humanities, it would not be able to do so. Most importantly, I've taught students to use magic words or boundary setting words in prompts for best results. It would say, according to Professor Joubin, or according to chapter 2, or according to the name of this author. How do you define critical theory? So that is very important to keep in mind. And in fact, in writing instructions, this is known as signposting, right? An effective piece of writing would do plenty of signposting. I'm about to make 3 arguments. The first argument is, and you would apply this similar principle in your prompt to the AI. Last but not least, my AI is trustworthy as defined by the National Institute of Standards and Technology. The NIST came up with 4 pillars regarding large language models' trustworthiness. My model is explainable because at the link here, as you can see on criticaltheory.info, you can see the precise process the precise process through which my AI model comes up with an answer. It will the dialog box is actually coded in HTML, so it's just part of the website feature. Once you input a prompt, it'll take it and make a call to OpenAI. So this is the large language model part, but it does not draw answer from ChatGPT. It would then interact with the proprietary code that is hosted on another database server in order and look into the specific documents that are set as the boundary, that's the data set, and draw answers from within that. And so it's fully interpretable, and it is accountable as well, because my background prompts and instructions are made transparent to my students. For example, they know full well from day one that this particular AI bot is not here to write papers for them. It always answers succinctly and with bullet points. So that's just a built-in feature. And therefore, I also fulfill the fourth requirement. It is fully transparent. This is not a commercial project. It's completely open access and free for anyone to use, not just my students. I built this bot not only to address the needs according to the surveys of higher education, but also to solve two problems. The first is that more and more students are being misled by the idea of singularity. And the second is that there's a misunderstanding of what critical thinking is. So the first problem, singularity, is induced by the conversational interface of current AI. Since it talks fluently and always gives you grammatically correct sentences, it sounded like a lecture. So it sounded like a singular source of information. It sounds ultimate, right? And the second problem with critical thinking is that there's a lot of misunderstanding of synthesis as critical thinking. To synthesize something, to extrapolate patterns or information from data, it is important first step toward research, but that in itself is not critical thinking, even though that's what AI does. And so to address this, my first goal is to teach critical questioning skills, because questions are data points. They're often overlooked, but they're important data points. So asking effective questions is actually as important as solving problems. For example, early on in the semester, a student's question or prompt might look something like this. Why did Shakespeare's contemporary audiences take boy actors for girls? So in Renaissance England, women were banned to perform on the professional stage. They're completely banned. So all theater productions, professional productions, were all male. Even the female characters, they were taken on by the so-called boy actors. And so, of course, that triggers these questions. Why did they take boys for girls? But it doesn't actually dig very deep in an open-ended way to explore the unique culture of historical period or how we think about history, right? Toward the end, after many iterations with AI, after workshopping ideas in class, they started to work toward some versions of this. How did early modern people practice gender on stage? So it's far more open-ended. It triggers conversation. There's a rich dialogue to be had around all of this. When you talk about how they practice gender, right? What's the meaning of that mustache they bring? How about card pieces and all of these? And do they focus on verisimilitude, the boy actors? Do they really quote unquote pass as the female characters? All these become interesting points for discussion. So with critical questioning skills, we can then develop metacognition skills, That's also to solve the two challenges that I mentioned. Metacognition basically refers to the idea that you take some distance, you become aware of your own thought processes. Why did I ask a question? Why did I ask that question? Why did I ask the question in this particular way? Could it be because I'm a product of my era? There are things I inherited, perhaps there are anxieties that I harbor, and so on. So, for example, we can ask why and how does the AI recycle contemporary sexist vocabulary, such as cross-dressing, when discussing Renaissance cross-gender practices on stage? Now, that is a sophisticated and open-ended research question demonstrating metacognition skills. So the goal of these exercises is to develop critical questioning and metacognition skills through iterations, also known as versions. In coding, we have the notion of version control, but here you would build it out through many iterations, through many rounds of editing and rewriting. We can also use AI. Again, this is under the rubric of metacognition, to recognize patterns in our own writing. Do we overuse the word clearly, or throughout history, or maybe rely too much on passive voices? So since AI is so good in pattern recognition, that is one good use to put it. Because large language models, they operate based on the ability to predict the most likely ending to a sentence, the next word, right? The most likely next word. In this regard, it can really help students think metacognitively, recognize repetitive issues or patterns in their own writing, and that's extremely helpful. So it's as if it's holding up a mirror to our writing. So to come back to the notion of social collaboration, Jaron Lanier says that seeing AI as a form of social collaboration is actually more actionable. It gives us access to the engine room, which is made of people. And in this way, we will perhaps de-emphasize the notion of our relationship to AI as human versus machines, but rather humans and humans. So with collaboration, we can promote intentioned interactions with AI. With those examples that are outlined, we can have more explicit rules of the game. For example, AI is not an effective search engine, but AI is an excellent fictional character, a kind of role-playing partner to rehearse various social scenarios with us. And so AI should be used in socially bounded context, right, within the context of use. And with social collaboration, I believe we'll be better able to adapt to inquiry-driven culture, the inquiry-driven culture that we live in, right? A lot of our activities are now governed by algorithmic-based inquiries, from a simple Google search to interacting with Amazon Alexa, or seeking direction from digital maps. In other words, our society has decided largely to outsource the task of memorization. Currently, we do not memorize every single thing. What we do, however, is that we know where the memory is stored. So we go there to retrieve, and so we have collective repertoire and archives, and so on. So we also need to start to embrace the ambiguity in AI, in this AI-mediated world. I spoke of ecology of words, in which you have many words, some of them with more questionable origins. But it's a question of nobody can know for sure. And I focus, therefore, more on the impact of words, on the social actions that the words would induce, what they're doing, what their effect are, right? Are they compelling? All of these becomes more intellectually fruitful questions to ask rather than only the provenance. Provenance is important, like where the words came from. Are the words entirely yours? But also equally interesting in this kind of opaque situations. In the end, you assembled all these words. Maybe you looked some words up in a dictionary. AI is a type of dictionary. What are your intentions? What do you intend for the words to accomplish? I want to end with one more real-life example of social AI as social collaboration. AI is actually theatrical in nature. I say this because AI is reactionary, right? It's like an actor. It's not by coincidence we call the input prompt, to prompt an AI, like a prompt book for an actor on stage. And so AI's output is a bit of kind of improvised performance based on your prompt. It'll put on a show. So if we understand theatrical performance to be intentioned enactment of text, that relies on an interface. The interface could be the proscenium stage, for example. Then AI really is a form of theater because, first of all, it's a technology of representation, and it's similar to stagecraft, right? Both are governed by technologies of representation, whether it's a proscenium stage or your screen. And AI's representational technology is statistics based, but that doesn't change the fact that it's a representational technology. And so its enactments are based on and inspired by users' prompts. The outputs are then delivered by the interfaces. The interface, of course, not 0 and 1, but actually natural language. So if we understand it this way, AI can actually help us. It can be a mirror for us. We can, think about our self-knowledge, what we think about ourselves. So interactions with AI could potentially promote self-reflection. So with its flaws notwithstanding, we can put this AI to limited use as long as we use it as an aesthetic instrument and not an instrument of reason. I say aesthetic instrument because of its capacity to act as fiction and in fiction. So some artists have already used generative AI as an aesthetic instrument. And here is one of the latest examples. At MIT, they recently launched this project called Joubin. Joubin means dream in Thai. So this is a human AI co-dancing project. And their goal is to do interactive preservation. They're trying to preserve 100 years of lost heritage, a form of dancing that is so intricate and beautiful, but photographs or even videos would not be quite enough to fully preserve and document it. The best is actually to make it a living tradition, to have contemporary people to continue to dance it. And so this is an embodied knowledge of intangible heritage that is otherwise not possible to preserve. So Gen AI comes in, it has a role here as they're dancing in this particular production. You have AI taking in a live feed of the dancers. And then based on that, the AI will create a virtual character who could improvise his own choreography. And so the human dancers from time to time will look to it, will respond to it, take inspiration from it, and as they put it, drift on the virtual model's poses. So it's like jazz. Of course, the caveat, like anything with generative AI, right? When they hallucinate in the output, here the virtual characters are not limited by physics or the anatomy of joints. The human dancers are, but the artists didn't see this as limitation. They said, quote, "Our constraints as humans give meaning to our art." I thought that's beautifully said. And These are just a few screenshots of how it works in reality. Once again, thank you for joining me to explore generative AI in the ecology of words. Have a wonderful day.